Hey, what's up, everybody? I want to welcome you to another episode of the Dreamers Pro Daily Recap, where we give you a recap of all of the hot topics that we covered that day. You can catch them in their long format and also catch it fully streaming for free on Apple Podcasts. I'm dealing with a bit of a cold here that's been trying to bully me over the last few days. Anyway, I came across an article here from Awful Announcer not too long ago. I'd actually seen it before, but I decided to postpone it. Then I said, okay, today's Monday. Let's dabble. Anyway, the article has the following headline saying, Stephen A. Smith wonders why white people don't get nicknames like Screaming A. And I said to myself, you have got to be joking. You have got to be. Is this where we are with Stephen A. Smith? Right? I can't even believe it. Let me continue on with the article here because I want to read a little bit more. Stephen A. Smith earned the nickname Screaming A early in his TV career because of his boisterous personality and because it's a puny rhyme. While the nickname might fit the character, the First Take host doesn't appear to view being known as Screaming A as any sort of badge of honor. Instead, he wonders why passionate white people in media aren't similarly accused of screaming all the time. During his Friday afternoon show on Mad Dog Sports Radio for SiriusXM, Smith pushed back on his critics in the wake of Max Kellerman finally addressing their First Take breakup more than 5 years ago. Smith never named Kellerman or anyone else while addressing his antics, but after claiming the people who talk smack about me could all kiss my ass, he pivoted to his Screaming A nickname, implying there might be a racial component behind it. So, guys, I want you guys to brace yourself for this. All right, so let me continue on. He says, you got a lot of loud ass white people. They ain't called screaming whatever, Smith said. They're considered passionate, but I'm screaming. And if I'm screaming, I'm angry. But they're considered passionate. So there's a discrepancy, and sometimes you feel compelled to bring that up. It then continues on. Charles Barkley has similarly taken issue with being known as brash, believing his enthusiasm gets labeled brash, while white commentators are more likely to be dubbed passionate. Now, I want to do something for you guys here. We want to play some quick sound of Stephen A. Smith and Chris Mad Dog Russo and Paul Feinbaum talking together on ESPN First Take. And I want you to listen to both of these guys get into a loud screamathon. Take a listen to this sound quickly.
Ohio State.
Yes, he should not coach the rest of the year. I'm with you.
So the players should play, right, even though they had an event.
Yes.
Even though they had an event.
Players on that team. Yes, Steven.
Well, what about the 100 players on the other teams?
They were going to lose anyway, Steven. It was 42 nothing in these games.
How do you know that? How do you know that?
Bowling Green was going to beat Michigan, Steve.
I'm talking about the players from the other that could be eligible for the college football playoff.
No, he's talking
Michigan's
about
gonna get a spot over somebody.
He's talking about the CFP spot, that they're going to take a spot from a team
but
that
they
didn't
won
cheat.
the games anyway, Steve.
Alabama,
from what Paul's saying, we're not so sure that would have
Texas,
happened. He was struggling
Oregon.
as a coach.
Yeah.
And then
I'm talking about this year particularly.
Yeah.
Rutgers, Illinois, Purdue, Nebraska.
I'm not talking about
these
that.
teams stink.
I'm talking about who's going to be robbed. I'm talking about who's going to be robbed of a college football playoffs because Michigan is in. I'm not talking about the Bowling Greens. I'm talking about somebody that's going to be left on the outside.
Oregon, go beat Washington. Alabama, go beat Georgia. Texas, go do your thing and you won't be robbed.
Fine.
Take care of your own thing.
And what if they do and they still don't? And what if they do? What if they do and still don't get in because Michigan gets to be ahead of them? What if that happens?
If you suspend Harbaugh now and they beat Penn State and Ohio State,
stop it.
nobody's going to say
That's
anything about
ridiculous.
Michigan being
You're
in the Final
ridiculous.
Four.
It don't make no sense what you say. You're wrong. You're definitely wrong. I don't care what you say. You're
just
wrong.
get it on a record.
You're
You're saying suspend him or fire him?
Suspend him.
Don't fire him.
You can't fire him. Suspend him.
You don't even talk about firing him. You don't even talk about firing him.
That's painful enough. Paul agrees. Suspend him.
For who?
What do you mean?
He'll probably go to Cancun to sip us some tequila or something.
Games.
Talking about.
So you heard the sound there. I want to quickly read through some of the comments and read some of the people. One person says, Molly is all of us. Let me read another one. ESPN's version of The View. Another viewer. Incoherent, rambling, embarrassing from ESPN. Another guy said, Russo is like fingernails on a chalkboard. Just can't do it. Another guy said, I wish Stephen A was an expert at shutting his mouth. Another guy said, I thought Russo was retiring after the Phillies lost. What a hack. Why am I reading these various comments? I'm reading it to say that people are also saying that about Chris Mad Dog Russo. In his name, it implies it. Chris Mad Dog Russo. What is a mad dog? What is a mad dog? Isn't a mad dog that something is dangerous, something you have to stay away from, and it's belligerent, and it could bite you at any moment? That's Chris Russo's name. Right? And everybody calls him that. I haven't heard Chris Russo talk about, man, I hate the fact that they call me Chris Mad Dog. He even put it in his name. Right? He even put it in his name. That's number one. Number two, Stephen A. Smith, you shout, you scream a lot. What do you mean is a white or black thing? You scream a lot. You're always making a lot of noise. You're always hollering and screaming and shouting. What do you mean it has to do with race? There are other black commentators that are not synonymous with screaming. People we've seen on television. Is Jason Whitlock synonymous with screaming? Was Marcellus Wiley synonymous with screaming? Is Ryan Clark synonymous with screaming? These guys have the other things that are said about them. It ain't screaming, right? And then you have white commentators. They have their own thing. Do you hear the stuff that gets said about Nick Wright? I mean, I'm just thinking of some names right now that can come to my mind. Skip Bayless, how he was called a hater. Like people get called things that can be associated with the way to conduct themselves on TV and the things that they say. It's not a race thing. I don't believe it's a race thing. I just believe that Stephen A. Smith be loud as hell. A prime example of this, listen to his rant on Democratic Senator Mark Kelly. Was he talking the way I'm talking to you right now? Or was he not screaming? Right? And I don't understand why that's something to be offended by when that's what you do. Just embrace it and move the hell on. But to play the race card here and now? Really, buddy? This is what we're doing? The race card? Nah, that's not going to fly. That is just not going to fly. As you guys know, we're in a pretty interesting time and place in the NBA. We will be having the first USA International Players All-Star Weekend this coming 2026. And it really shows you where the game is now. The fact of the matter is, the best players, the creme de la creme, the top 5, top 10 guys are European players. It just is what it is. Or foreign players, let me say that. It just is what it is. You look at Victor Wembanyama. You look at Luka Doncic. You look at SGA. And I'm sure that a few others is escaping my mind at the moment. Nikola Jokic and some others. These guys are regarded as the best players in the world. This wasn't the case years ago. When the original Dream Team went to the Olympics and blew the doors off the competition, that now seems like a distant memory. The last Olympic that America was in, we barely won. Barely. It took a team of all-stars to beat a team that probably had 1 or 2 all-stars, maybe, and a bunch of role players from the NBA and those various leagues around the world. And we barely won, had it not been the heroics of Stephen Curry. Right? But this was all predicted years ago, right? Years ago. And we had talked about this before. But what brought it to my attention to talk about it today was an article I came across from Basketball Forever. Basketball Network. And it says, we're losing the battle. Penny Hardaway shares why he is not surprised by the European takeover in the NBA. It continues on. It says, after 2 weeks of play, the 2 top 5 in MVP race were Nikola Jokic, SGA, Luka Doncic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Victor Wembanyama. Now with Antetokounmpo and Wemby currently sidelined, the first 3 are battling fiercely for the Michael Jordan Trophy. Then continues on. And while this international dominance is nothing new, what's beginning to worry U.S. basketball is the fact that the gap is growing bigger year by year. With LeBron James, Stephen Curry, and Kevin Durant soon leaving the stage, it could be more than a decade before we see another US-born MVP. And Penny Hardaway may have explained why better than anyone. The amount of European players in the league that are dominating is not shocking to me because I saw it a long time ago because of how the Europeans train. And we have not adopted that theory in the US because everybody is so single and separate. The AAU brings us together for a whole week, but they don't practice. So how does a kid get better outside having an individual trainer? Whereas Europe is giving you trainers because they tried to catch up with the United States and probably in some ways surpassed, Penny said on Hoops Genius podcast. Because if you're in the gym the whole day, working on your skill set, on your shooting, competing against one another, and even Luka Doncic said it's easier here than back in Europe. We are losing the battle from that point of view because we're not skilled enough. And there's not enough playing basketball 5-on-5, Penny added. I thought he stated the obvious. Well, as it turns out, this was a very serious matter for the late, great Kobe Bryant. And he spoke about this extensively towards the end of his career and in retirement. So what we want to do is want to play some of what Kobe Bryant had to say about this in interviews and some of what we read in some articles about what Kobe Bryant had to say about the decline of American players to international players. Take a listen to this sound here.
Kobe, you've been pretty critical of the AAU system and the way American players are brought up.
Not pretty critical. I'm extremely critical. I hate it. Because it doesn't teach our players how to play the right way. How to think the game, how to play in combinations of threes. And I think everything is it's a reward system. I think coaches who are teaching the game are getting rewarded one fashion or another. And it's just a showcase.
Do you feel like
it's absolutely horrible for the game.
The young guys that are coming up, do you feel like the game is kind of stiff, whereas when your guys were more skilled?
Yeah, but I think that was just by luck in the generation that I grew up in. You know what I mean? Because like my generation is when the AAU basketball really started becoming and I got lucky because I grew up in Europe.
Right.
Everything there was still fundamental. So I learned all the basics. And I think we're doing a tremendous disservice to our young basketball players right now. That's something that definitely needs to be fixed, and it's going to be one of the things that I definitely focus on.
Kobe Bryant believes European basketball players are more skillful than American basketball players and says it's a growing trend that can be blamed on the greed of coaching at the AAU level. I think that European players are just way more skillful. Bryant said Friday night after the Los Angeles Lakers 109-106 loss to the Memphis Grizzlies. They're just taught the game the right way at an early age. They're more skillful. It's something we really have to fix. We really have to address that. We have to teach our kids to play the right way. Bryant was quick to point a finger at the decline of skilled players in the United States. He then spoke about AAU. Bryant said, horrible, terrible AAU. It's stupid, and it doesn't teach our kids how to play the game the right way. The article then continues on. Bryant was born in Philadelphia, but when he was 6, his father, former NBA player Joe Bryant, moved the family to Italy to continue his playing career. Kobe spent his childhood in Europe until Joe retired in 1991 and moved the family back to the United States. When you have limitations and you understand your limitations and you stay within yourself, you can be great, Kobe Bryant said. You know what you can do and what you can't do. In America, it's a big problem for us because we're not teaching players how to play all-around basketball. That's why you have Pau and Marc Gasol, and that's the reason why 90% of the Spurs roster is European players, because they have more skill. Bryant smiled when asked what type of player he would have become if his family never moved to Italy and hadn't learned how to play the game in Europe. Horrible. He says, I probably wouldn't be able to dribble with my left hand and shoot with my left hand and have good footwork, Bryant said. I was kind of fortunate because I was growing up in Italy. The Red Auerbachs, the Tex winners, and all the great coaches were doing clinics and camps in Europe. They were teaching all the club coaches, and the club coaches were following their advice and their fundamentals like the Bible. And they were teaching all of us kids that type of stuff. Me, Manu, all of these guys that grew up around that same time were a product of that. It's a big difference. Bryant had a simple solution to the problem. Teach players the game at an early age and stop treating them like cash cows for everyone to profit off of, he said. That's how you do it. You have to teach them the game, give them instruction. But Bryant would hold his annual summer basketball camp and was quick to point out that any solution involving changing the current AAU basketball won't happen overnight. That's a deep well, because then you start cutting into people's pockets. Bryant said people get really upset when you start cutting into their pockets because all they do is try to profit off these poor kids. There's no quick answer. Excellent. So you heard what Kobe Bryant had to say. This was all foreshadowed. This was all foreshadowed. If you look at the most skilled guys in the league, it's clear that is the foreign players, with the exception of Giannis, because Giannis is just a freak of nature athlete. Outside of Giannis it's these guys. When was the last time an American won an MVP? When was that? All right. Joel Embiid don't count. He's from Cameroon. Yeah, he became naturalized as a citizen and got his he's from Cameroon. Like, when was the last player we had? He wasn't even born in America. So when was the last player we had? Where was the last one? It's been Giannis 2 times. Then we had Nikola Jokic a bunch of damn times. Then we had SGA last year. And then we had the player's name just slipped on, and Joel Embiid. Who's leading the MVP race this year? Isn't most likely not going to be Nikola Jokic or SGA. Who's going to topple them? What American player is going to topple these guys in the foreseeable? Nobody. And I think a lot of that goes to the system that these guys have implemented in terms of rearing American players. But I also feel like these guys, they just dropped the ball. These dudes became more fascinated with being cool and looking good than actually keeping the sport alive and pushing the legacy forward. Look at all their predecessors. They weren't too big to compete in a slam dunk contest. They weren't too big to compete in All-Star Weekend. They weren't too big to play defense. These guys believe they are. These guys, you know why? Because they feel it's their right. They feel it's their right. Oh, because the Kobe's, the Jordans, the LeBrons, all of these guys, they, so it's ours. No. You have to fight for what you have. The NBA is not locked to just America. It's open to the world. So you better sit your ass up and play. You think they're just going to sit back and let you do? Nah, dog. You got to play to fight for it. Those days are over. And these guys don't have that pride anymore. They don't. If we want to look where this thing went wrong beyond what they just explained, look in the mirror. American players got too relaxed. We all know what it is. We all know what it is. And what they didn't bank on was that Americans would start rooting for other players, regardless of whether or not they were born in the States or not. They didn't bank on that. You have so many fans of Victor Wembanyama. People don't care. People want to see good basketball, bro. At the end of the day, people want to see good bat. They don't care where you're from. I don't care where you're from. Can you ball? That's where most fans are at this point. When you got Americans talking about they wanted USA to lose, that shows you that they're fed up of these guys. That's a direct indictment that they're fed up of these guys. They're fed up of them. So this is where we are. Kobe predicted it, and it's over now. It's over. They may not be in terms of the volume as the amount of them, because more players in the United States get drafted, but in terms of the best, like if we were to have an all-star team with just like a game with just all-stars, and put it this way. The international players starting 5, there's no iteration or combination of a starting 5 of American players that compete with them. There's none. Not on earth. Not on this earth. There's none. You couldn't bring 5 guys that could compete with you. There's none. What lineup are you going to put out to beat SGA, Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Victor Wembanyama? Who? There's nobody on earth. There's no group we could put together that are beating that group. Don't even think about it. It's not even ever going to happen. Now, people can run and say, oh, no, you got to play position. Dogs, this is positionless basketball we playing right now. There's nobody that's with those guys. For whatever reason, man, people seem to be liking some of these political shows that we do. Now, some people dislike it, and I can understand it. Politics is very, very polarizing. Some people like, Charles, I don't understand. I don't understand why all of a sudden you're discussing these things. Well, there are a lot of things going on in the world, and I just have an opinion on them, right? And I want to share some of my thoughts. Sometimes people agree with me. Sometimes people disagree with me. But these things that I'm talking about are things that I think about, watch throughout my day. It just so happens that I don't share them because I only talk sports. But I said, hey, let me just try to, express my thoughts on some of these issues. And if people like them, fine. If they don't, they won't. And obviously, I'm open to, criticism, constructive criticism, where you guys think I can get better. So I welcome all of that. But anyway, Stephen A. Smith, right, recently went on The View to talk politics. Why they would invite Stephen A. Smith to The View is beyond me. But nevertheless, he went there, right? So he goes on The View. They're talking about the Democrats and all of this. Then they get to his comments that he made about Democratic Senator Mark Kelly, where Stephen A. Smith went on this tirade on his show Straight Shooter over the comments that Senator Mark Kelly and some of his colleagues made, where they were essentially saying to the military members, you don't have to follow unlawful orders, right? Seems pretty rudimentary, nothing confusing about it. But for Stephen A. Smith, somehow, some way, he managed to contort the meaning of what Mark Kelly was saying and then turn it into, you're telling troops to defy the president of the United States. And most of us were sitting here absolutely bewildered at the things that Stephen A. Smith was saying. So he made a lot of headlines for those comments. We did a show about it. So one would have thought, well, when he goes on The View, maybe he's had time to kind of think about it, hear some of the pushback, hear people trying to correct him and say, no, I think you misinterpreted what this guy was saying. What he said was pretty clear. You just took it in a totally different direction. But in typical Stephen A. Smith fashion, he then decided to double down on his comments. Take a listen to what this guy said on The View here.
And you had some really sharp criticisms of Democrats in the election for having sort of lost touch with the issues the voters cared about.
Yep.
How are you feeling now a year into Trump? And what do you make of this discussion around affordability and him saying it seems like it's a scam from Democrats?
Well, that's rhetoric on his part. There's nothing surprising or unpredictable about that. You could see that coming from a mile away because he has to say that right now because it's an issue and a concern for the American people. And he wants to act as if there is no concern because everything he's doing is just so beautiful and so marvelous and what have you. But in the end, the Democrats give the credit where credit is due at this particular moment in time. I think that they've learned from some of their mistakes anyway. When you see what happened in New York with Mamdani, when you see what happens in New Jersey with Cheryl as the governor, when you see what happens with Spanberger in Virginia, clearly there's something that's going on within the Democratic establishment that's saying, let's focus on real issues that are pertinent to the American people. Let's make sure we articulate ourselves appropriately so we don't lose sight of what the message should be. Leading up to the election, they did just that, and I thought they handed him the election as opposed to him actually winning it. Now they're forcing him to play ball and figure out a way to beat them because they're coming and they're gaining some momentum. We'll see what happens.
Now, let me just remind you that Pete Hegseth said in 2016, I do think there have to be consequences for abject war crimes. If you're doing something that is just completely unlawful and ruthless, then there is a consequence for that. That's why the military said it won't follow unlawful orders from their commander-in-chief. Okay. Now, given the fact that the secretary himself said that, I'd love to give you the opportunity to perhaps change your position on what you said.
I'm not changing a thing.
Okay.
I didn't stutter when I said it.
You want to stay loud and wrong?
Well, you could call it loud and wrong all you want to. You're entitled to your opinion. I'm entitled to mine.
Okay.
Here's the reality of the situation. First of all, I don't give a damn what Pete Hegseth has to say because I will tell you right now, he was never qualified for the job. When you talk about DEI and eradicating that, excuse me, what was he doing hosting Fox News on the weekend and all of a sudden he's the defense secretary?
Right.
Please, give me a break. I don't care what he has to say. Let me get that out the way. As it pertains to Mark Kelly, what I was talking about is military. What I did was get on the phone with family and friends who have served in the military. And I said, we're not civilians. This is not the court of law. You can be implicated for implying something if you are a former military member or you are a present military member. It wasn't what Mark Kelly said. It's the fact that he was a combat Navy pilot who served in the military, who would tell folks, ignore an order when it could get them in
He
the
did not say
I said illegal.
ignore.
I said illegal. I'm talking about illegal. I understand that.
He said you don't have to follow an unlawful order, and that is in the military code of conduct.
And I'm saying to you, hold on, which I'm aware of.
But it didn't sound like you were aware of that.
Well, no. I disagree with you.
Stephen, can I ask you a question?
I had two governors, by the way, text me to tell me I was wrong, and they agree with you.
You are wrong.
I had two senators that reached out to me and said, you weren't wrong at all.
Well, Mikey Sherrill did say that the reason they felt the need to put that out is they were constantly being approached by people in the military saying, we're being put in really uncomfortable situations.
But
that to me is a little more relatable when you're a veteran yourself.
But I'm saying let me say this real quick.
You got to do it real quick. Or wait till we come back.
All I'm saying is this. If you're a member of the military, I'm looking at the soldiers as saying, don't get yourself in trouble. Let somebody else do it. Don't you do it because it ain't going to work for you.
Excellent. So you heard his comments, right? Now, as you guys know, D.L. Hughley is not a fan of Stephen A. Smith. And let me just say this, right? I understand that there's some people, let me not be presumptive here, but there's some people on our show that are not a fan of D.L. Hughley and all that, which is 100% fine. I'm not here advocating for D.L. Hughley. However, I'm reacting to what he said as it pertains to Stephen A. Smith and the nonsense that he's been saying on this particular issue here. So I came across a clip here, which was like an amalgamation of things that D.L. Hughley was saying in response to Stephen A. Smith. And he basically baptized this dude, bro. Like, he absolutely laid the gauntlet down. So for those of you who didn't hear what D.L. Hughley had to say in response to Stephen A. Smith's comments on The View and on Senator Mark Kelly, want to play what he had to say for you now, and then we're going to come back and react to his comments. Take a listen to D.L. Hughley here.
And in response to that, of course, you see Sonny Holston read what Pete Hegseth, the current Secretary of Defense, said, or Secretary of War, said.
Now, let me just remind you that Pete Hegseth said in 2016, I do think there have to be consequences for abject war crimes. If you're doing something that is just completely unlawful and ruthless, then there is a consequence for that. That's why the military said it won't follow unlawful orders from their commander-in-chief.
Okay. Virtually the same thing that Senator Kelly said that sparked Stephen's rant on his social media page. It's ironic that the first thing Stephen A. would do would to be assail Hegseth's resume. Well, basically saying, he was a podcaster who became Secretary of State. What the ironic thing is Stephen A. Smith is a broadcaster who thinks he can be president. But the fact that being loud and wrong, when given a chance with new information to make a different decision, to be nuanced, what he decided to do was double down. And it's interesting because he believes, obviously, that being loud and wrong is leadership. But being loud and wrong is the sole province of old white dudes. They're the only ones who are going to get to be loud and wrong. In my estimation, this is the tale of two black men. One, of course, is Stephen A. Smith and his assessment of the situation. The other is Admiral Alvin Hugley, a black man who was a four-star admiral who was basically in charge of South Canada. This would have been his area, the Caribbean. Allegedly, Admiral Hugley was given an opportunity. He was basically told by Pete Hegseth what he wanted to do. And this admiral, who had been in the Navy 37 years, achieved the highest rank possible, decided rather than to obey an order he was conflicted by, that he believed was problematic, that he believed might have even been illegal. Rather than do that, he walked away and resigned. This is a tale of two black men. One who believes that being loud and wrong is leadership, Stephen A. Smith, and one is Admiral Alvin Hugley, who believes that refusing to do wrong is leadership. In this world, where the loudest voice in the room, where people commit to a path and decide, hell or high water, we're going to go this way regardless of what damage it does. In this world that exists like that, don't be a Stephen A. Smith. Be an Admiral Hugley.
Excellent. So you heard his comments. What are my thoughts about this? I don't think D.L. Hughley is breaking any ground. by pointing out the fact that Stephen A. Smith was clearly wrong on this issue, right? I think the point he was talking about was more of a character issue with Stephen A. Smith. And look, D.L. Hugley's had issues with close friend to the channel, Marcellus Wiley, who I'm cool with too, right? So I'm not here picking any sides or anything like this, but as it pertains to his comments to Stephen A. Smith, I think he's saying beyond the black aspect of it all, I just think that Stephen A. Smith has a hard time with being wrong. I think he struggles with being wrong. Even if you listen to him on The View, when they brought up the question, he got very, very defensive. And people like him, when they're wrong, especially on issues like this, they double down. Now, let me tell you why I think he got very defensive about this. Clearly, politics is not Stephen A. Smith's wheelhouse, right? And when you feel like you may not be 100% good at something, or you know that there's some insecurities there, you tend to be defensive about that thing when people bring it up, right? It's just a natural thing. If they said, oh, this and this about his sports take, he wouldn't react the way that he did, right? But in this case, he's defensive about it. Why? Because he hears what people are saying about him. Punch up Stephen A. Smith and politics and see what the vast majority of people are saying about him. The vast majority. Most people are saying he doesn't know what he's talking about. And the platforms that invite him on, like maybe Valuetainment, Sean Hannity, oh my God, the Chris Cuomo show, I forgot the name, News Nation, they, I believe, are inviting him for him to make a spectacle of himself. I think at the end of those shows, I don't think any of these guys take him seriously whatsoever. But they know it's going to be great entertainment. So they let him sit up there and run his mouth. That's essentially what they do. Look, we are living in serious times in the United States. Serious times. You have some Americans that are 100% behind the administration and the tactics that they're using, and they feel like the president has a mandate to do what he said he was going to do during his presidential campaign. Whereas you have other Americans that are like, okay, we understand that you're the president, but you need to operate within the law. All right. No one is taking it away from you that you're the president of the United States. No one is, right? At least not now, unless in the midterms, if the Democrats do very well, they may try to impeach him, but that's a totally different thing. No one is taking that away. But you have to act lawfully, right? So when you listen to the president's reaction to what Senator Mark Kelly said, it was like, how dare you try to define me? And that kind of plays into some of the fears that a bunch of Americans feel about this administration. That's really what's going on here. So when you have a guy like Stephen A. Smith that's just up here making noise and hollering and screaming about things, people are going to push back on him, right? Beyond the fact that he's a black guy with Republican, beyond that fact, it's like, bro, these are serious times that we are living in. So when you have a senator saying, I believe who served in the Navy, saying you must follow the rule of law and you are within your rights to disobey unlawful orders, you can't be the guy jumping out here and trying to chastise the senator for saying the correct thing. We can ill afford to have voices like this propagating these kind of views to the we can ill afford to have it happen. These are serious issues. We're not talking about Michael Jordan versus LeBron James. These are serious matters. So we need to be very thoughtful about the things that we say. We are living in the era of where people just say flippant things and gain audiences. This is where we are. Whoever says the most egregious, the most flippant thing usually now gains traction. And you see it on both sides of the aisle. You see people grifting on the left. You see people grifting on the right, playing into some of the fears of those on the far right and the far left. It's happening everywhere. So what we need now is some common sense and people that are out there to give an honest take on what the truth is, not just up there hollering and screaming and trying to get ratings and trying to make headlines, because I said this is what we don't need. We simply do not need this, and we need to be calculated and measured in the things that we say. In the case of what he said here, I don't understand what point he feels he's defending. The first show that we produced about it, I asked the people, if you have ever served in the Army or currently serving in the Army, the Navy, whatever, please weigh in on this issue and let us know, the audience I'm talking about, for our own edification here, are you meant to obey unlawful orders? Almost every person that's either served, man and woman, or currently serving, they all said no. All of them. So what are you talking about? But I think what happened was Stephen A. Smith is so desperate to appease the president. It's almost like as if he feels he's going to give him like a seat in his cabinet or something. Like it's so much. Usually when you have people like this twerking it up for a particular politician, they're looking to gain something in return. Maybe a favor, maybe they need a bill passed that would help their business, whatever. But in the case of Stephen A., it's like you're for what reason? For what reason are you doing all of this? So look, this is my honest take on the issue. I think that we need to be very careful about the things that we say and try to moderate the temperature. If you notice, I don't, even though, I didn't vote for the president, you don't hear me here chastising him or I still give him the proper respect. President Donald, I still do it, right? And I think we need that. There still needs to be some decorum within the way we deal with one another. The minute we just start, this guy, then, the thing turns into an entire jungle. And I still think that you can have opinions on these issues, keep it clean, and you don't have to dive into the deep end where you're just saying nasty things, right? I still give the president his respect as the president because he's the president. So whoever's the next president, you may like him and the next person may not like him, but that still doesn't change the fact that they're the president. I think that at least at the very, if not because you don't like the guy, at least for the office, even if the person you're saying, okay, this guy's not respecting, that's fine. I understand it. But at least for you to be an example, say, okay, I'm going to respect the office. Because that sets a good example and it shows people that, look, this is something that needs to be protected and it's sacred.